11 years and 1 month ago, my unit deployed to Afghanistan, a few hundred miles away from Bagram. And this was the year I woke up. July 2012 was the month I woke up. Here's that story. That month in Afghanistan was like every other month. Firefight after firefight after firefight. But I had my boys with me, and you get in so many firefights, you get to the point where you feel invincible. You know, you start making very, very minute mistakes, like gaining curiosity, like, ooh, I wonder where that artillery shell is going to land, or, ooh, where's that missile going to hit, you know? Well, I almost died 5 times, and multiple times was because of that mistake. I'm a man of God because of these moments. My faith was not strong before these moments. I believed in God, but I never really had an awakening, you know. I was very stubborn, foolish. Well, July 2012 was like every other day. We loaded up our Vicks. You know, I was 11 Charlie, had my mortar tube, 60 mic handheld. And I carried 6 rounds on my chest, 6 in my backpack, and they would carry like 1 to 2 rounds each. So we usually had about 10 to 20 60 millimeter rounds. Well, when it comes to Afghanistan, majority of our firefights were long distance. I would say 400 meters plus at any given time, which is the length of approximately 4 football fields. So having the 60 mic was very crucial. Like, yeah, we had M4s, yeah, we had saws, yeah, we had the Bravo, yeah, we had sometimes the Barrett 50 cal, whatever, but nothing put the fear in the Taliban's heart like the 60 mic. 1, you can't hear me shoot it, and 2, you can't hear it until it's too late. The 60 mic doesn't weigh that much, so you're able to run around with it, you know. When it came to my gear, when it came to my M4, all my rounds, all my ammo, I'd say everything came up to about 80 to 85 pounds, which wasn't too bad. But when it's 100 degrees out, it weighs on you. So the first time I almost died, I remember it was from a sniper. Yes. Our whole mission for 6 months over there was to locate and eliminate this sniper named Mustafa. But for some reason, this dude was always 3 steps ahead. Always. So, my very first time getting shot at by him, we called it the playground. For those who don't know, in Afghanistan, there's a main road. It's called Highway 1. Pretty much, picture a highway in the middle of the desert. That's pretty much Highway 1, right? In a certain area, we called the playground, right? So from the highway to the playground was about 500 meters of just open desert, right? Rock and desert, extremely flat. 500 meters out was this square mini village, probably, I would say, 300 feet by 300 feet with like 13 to 14 foot tall walls. And then approximately 500 meters in the same direction from there was the Long Village, right? Now, this Long Village consisted of multiple families. I would say it's probably a quarter mile long. You know, you had the mosque, you had this little tree area where there's a few trees in front, and there was one dirt road in and one dirt road out, right? So whenever we did our patrols there, looking for IDs or terrorists or whatever our mission was, it was a high probability we would take contact from the playground, right? So one time, really quick, one more detail. There's a dry riverbed that was in between the first building and the road. It was very little, and it curved like a snake, right? So if you stood in it, your head would be peeking over, pretty much. Well, my very first contact was from the sniper. I was peeking. I had my 4X on my M4. I had my mortar tube. So I would set my arm on the mortar tube and then the M4 like this and look through. So I had some stability. And I'll be honest, at that range, 500 plus meters out, it's hard to identify people before and after. It really is. It's so hard with all the elements, the sand blowing around, glares, the sun. It's extremely hard to identify someone, especially if they're not moving, Once you do identify them, then you might see something shiny move around or something, but you always need PID, positive identification, before we can take a shot, right? So all of a sudden I'm looking, and all of a sudden I hear this round go by my face. And I was like, whoa. And it was only one round. And me personally, I knew it was Mustafa. I knew it was. I just knew it. And so we pushed in, and nothing. The Taliban is very, famous for, taking pop shots or unloading or whatever, and then fleeing. They always had these underground tunnels, the sewer system, where they would always escape from. And the playground was perfect for that. Or the playground was perfect for them because they could take many shots for a few minutes, right? And still get away, because these tunnels just went everywhere, In July, we came back, right? We were on a mission to get this sniper. He took out multiple comrades. His stories went around our whole base, He was in the double digits for claiming lives. So we all knew that, right? This one particular time when we went to the playground, this is probably like our 10th or 11th time being there. So we know right when we pushed that first building, 500 meters out, we know something's going to happen. We're going to see movement. We're going to see shiny stuff in people's hands moving behind buildings and rocks and trees. Like, we already know. So this time we got a call to go out there, and we pushed that first building. We had Alpha Team on the right side and Bravo Team on the left side. I was with my captain and my boy Mart. Let's go. And captain came over and he was like, hey guys, I have a great idea. I was like, oh, okay. And at this point, I'm just a private. So whatever he says goes. And I remember he was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to split in half. 6 of us are going to run across. And then the other 6 or 7 are going to stay back and watch. See if we can bait them to shoot, right? So 6 people volunteered. I volunteered to stay back because I had the mortar tube. If they did take shots at my team, the first team that ran across, then I was able...
Go. Bye.
As long as all the elements aligned up. So they start running across. And about 300 meters to where they're running to, which was sideways of the main village, is another big, building that has a huge dirt wall, right? And I remember it was 300 meters almost exactly, because someone made the comparison of 3 football fields. So I remember them running across. They got to the middle. I'm looking through my ACOG, no movement, no movement. Then as soon as they got about 2/3 of the way across, we just saw so much movement on top of the mosque, on the side of the mosque, in the bushes. Even Sergeant S is like, yo, we got movement in the bush. He has something shiny, but we don't have positive identification if it's a gun or not, or an AK or whatever. It could be a shovel for all we know. In our hearts, we know what it is, but when it comes to paper in the Geneva Convention, you need PID. It's just that simple. So they ran across, and they made it. No shots fired. Before we continue the story, I do want to bring up something. A month prior to this, I was sitting in the chow hall, and my captain and his radio guy came up to me, and they sat down, and they just got back from a mission. I was off that day, and they came up to me like, yo, Trin, you won't believe it. We got into our first firefight. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, no way. That's crazy. So Captain D, he starts talking. He was like, yeah, it was wild, man. Like, they started shooting at us. See, like, the first sound you hear is a pop, 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 pop. And then you hear a crack, 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 crack. And then he's like, you hear a third sound. I'm like, third sound? What? He's like, yeah, man, it's like a laser beam. Pew, 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 pew. I'm like, bro, what is this, Star Wars? What is this, Star Trek? What are we fighting, aliens? So, remember him telling that story, and they described it in great detail, how they were on this hill, they took contact from a few hundred meters away, and they're firing back. They had no cover, rounds going by their face and stuff. Oh, man, I was like, man, they got their CIB, man. They got their combat infantry badge. I want mine, yo. So, fast forward a month. Captain D takes his men, run across. Nothing happens besides all the movement. And I just had this feeling. I'm like, dude, I have a terrible feeling. Like, this is my sixth sense kicking in, like, uh-oh. So I looked at the person who was in charge now. Since Captain D took his first team, ran across, that means Sergeant S is now in charge, right, of our mini group. And I looked, I'm like, Sergeant, this is stupid. He was like, yeah, I know. I was like, no, Sergeant, this is stupid. He's like, yeah. I was like, no. I said it 3 times. Sergeant, this is stupid. He's like, yep, Captain orders. Roger that. As soon as he said that, roger that. But I had to get my words across because I was feeling this sixth sense, right? So we get up. I grab my tube. I grab my M4. Got 6 rounds right here. Backpack on with 6 more in the back. And we start running across. We get about a quarter of the way and nothing. Hell, I'm starting to celebrate. I'm like, oh man, hey, they're not shooting at us. All right. Now, since I have like the most gear on, I have my mortar tube, my M4, my rucksack full of goodies. Obviously, I'm going to be a little slower than everybody else, right? So while I'm running, people are passing me up. My Sergeant M, he was the last person to pass me up. And at this point, we were about almost halfway, right? So I'm running, and all of a sudden, pow, 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 pow. I'm starting to hear these pops. It's a pop. A pop is just, a sound you hear when you hear a gunshot. Pop, pop. And all of a sudden, it turned to a crack. Okay, they're starting to aim near me, in the vicinity. So I'm running. Get about just past halfway. And all of a sudden, I start hearing this laser beam sound. I was like, I remember I was running, I was like, what the f- is that? I've never heard this sound in my life. And all of a sudden, I had a flashback of me sitting in the chow hall with my captain and the radio guy. And that whole conversation played in my head within milliseconds. And then I came back. And then I knew. I looked down. Just dirt kicking up everywhere. So I'm running. And then when it dawned on me 100%, I looked up into the sky. And I yelled. I said, God help me. God help me. God help me. And all of a sudden, everything slowed down, slow motion. A slow motion where you could write a book in a second. Each footstep felt like an eternity. Calling out to God, and He answered right away. You know that feeling you're being watched? That sixth sense in the back of your neck? Well, that's the feeling I had, but it was my whole body. And each step I took, it would get stronger. After asking God for help 3 times, He gave me a vision. And this vision was to slide. Each step I took, I contemplated it. You know, I questioned God's help. A few more steps of slow motion, and this feeling was unbearable. It was like the sixth sense times 1,000,000. And I knew this next step, if I do not slide, I'm dead. So I slid. And then everything kicked back into normal motion. As I slid, I had my tube like this, baseball slid. I took out the mortar round, put it in the tube, went up to one knee, and I remember looking at the bubble float around down below at 500-ish meters, and I knew. And I remember squinting, like my squinting would stop an AK round hitting me in the face or something. I remember squinting, looking down, and then I get up, shut up! And I start running again with my tube and my M4. Now, I had the mortar tube down packed. I knew the timing of every single meter. And I knew it would take 25-ish seconds to hit, which is a very long time. That's how high it goes. So I start running again. And I could see the bullet trail, the round trail, just. However, it was in front of me though, and it was moving faster and faster away. It was like someone just took a machine gun, just like. That's what it looked like. However, Sergeant M was in front of me. And at this point, he was probably like 30 meters in front. So as I'm running, I see these rounds get closer and closer and closer. I'm like, oh, he's about to get hit. And they get to his feet, and he falls. I was like, oh, shit. So I go running over there. And then I just stop. I'm like, dude, are you good? He's like, yeah, keep going. I'm like, no. Are you good? He's like, yeah, keep going. So at that very last second, I'm looking for blood, because if you get shot in certain angles, certain parts of your body, you won't feel it. It burns your nerves, and you won't know. So I'm looking for blood as he's rolling around. And remember, this terrain is completely flat. But where he ended up at, there was like this little rock. I would say no more than a foot. Very. And that's where he ended up at. So if he laid down, he kind of had cover, to be honest. And so I remember running, and all of a sudden, I looked up, and to the right of the mosque, it was on airburst mode. Airburst mode with the mortar means it uses the barometric pressure to explode in the air. It doesn't have to hit anything. It just has to reach a certain height from the ground before it goes off. So it rains down shrapnel instead of blowing up, then releasing shrapnel. So it rains it down. Extremely morbidly beautiful when you see it. And I remember seeing it go off just to the right of the mosque, exactly where they were at. And I remember my captain was like, "Is that enemy mortar?" I'm like, no, Captain, that was me. So we finally make it over. Sergeant M gets up, he gets to us, and we push into the village. So now we're, kicking in doors, clearing. I have my tube, so I couldn't kick indoors and clear, unfortunately. But we pushed in, and after that, we went quiet. Enemy was gone. After clearing the village, we decided to make that good old half-mile walk back to Highway 1 to our vehicles. That whole walk back, no one said anything. Not a peep. After we get back to our Vicks, the 50 cal gunner, he's just in an infantry way, like freaking out. Like, oh my God, y'all won't believe what I saw. So my boy, Sergeant M, and I, we're sitting across from each other. Just like, I look at him like, hey, what'd you see? And he's a country boy too. So he was like, y'all won't believe what I seen. Oh, so it all started off with the first team running across the field, and nothing happened. I saw a movement. I looked at my 50 cal, saw a movement, and all of a sudden, the second team from the building pushed across, and they just started getting lit up. I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden, that last person, I saw this bullet trail just catching up. Then it got to his feet, and then the person fell. I was like, oh, hell no, he got one of us. And all of a sudden, it kept going. And then it hit the second person. The second person fell. I was like, oh, we just lost 2 dudes. There's nothing I can do. And the trail kept going, and then it stopped. I looked at him, and I said, that was me. And that was Martin. I was the first person, and he was the second person. So I looked at Sergeant M, and I said, hey, man, what happened? Like, how did you, like, what happened? He was like, dude, I was running, and all of a sudden, it was like my leg purposefully tripped me. my leg tripped myself to fall. He's like, I can't explain it. It's like, I'm just running and my leg just kicked the other leg while running. And I just fell straight forward and fell. And then that's when I told him, I was like, dude, right when you fell is when the rounds were like at your feet, just dirt everywhere, man. I thought you were hit. At that very moment, I knew the truth. I called out to God, and he responded right away. A week later, I remember we were back driving on Highway 1, and we received some intel. The intel stated that 4 Taliban died that day, and we were the only ones in a firefight in that area the whole day. Shortly after, on Highway 1, we're just approaching the playground, and within that week, we obtained an enemy hand radio, and we had our Terp with us too. Really cool guy. I remember hearing this foreign language come across, and it was muffled. And everyone looked back, and everyone looked at the Terp like, what did it say? Because we know this is the enemy talking. And the Terp had an interesting look on his face, like, they said that type of look. So I remember my Captain D looked back, the Terp was like, hey, what'd they say? And the Terp just smiled. He was like, they gave y'all a nickname. We're like, wait, what? He was like, they recognize your vehicles. I was like, ooh. So then Captain D looks back. What did they say? The Terp says, they said, the storm is coming. The storm is coming. And at that very moment, we knew that we were the storm. I look back and I'm happy that everything happens, because sitting here right now, I have a new perspective. I have a new view on life. I appreciate every single day. Like, there's nothing that could happen in my life that would destroy me, that would make me weak, that would make me mentally handicapped. Nothing. I thank God for the good, and I thank God for the bad, because it's the good and the bad that makes us human. That's a fact. So God, thank you. You saved my life that day. If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. In the beginning, in the present, and in the future, Jesus is King. Evil never wins.